Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks out there. Welcome to the channel. Um, Glad you could be here. We go live Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. the Eastern Standard Time, UTC code -4 here on this channel. Yeah, I just want to let you guys know that this show is simulcast over. The audio goes out to Discord, Twitch, and YouTube. So if any of those platforms, any or all of those platforms you prefer to listen in or watch the show, please participate thereof. Now, this week, also, if you are new to the show, this week and each week, we take a particular subject, and it might be a simple subject or a very undefined subject, and we take it and we stretch it out and we use it for tabletop role-playing games specifically. And this week we're going to talk about crises. Crises. I understand that this week and many in the weeks prior and the upcoming weeks and maybe even months that the world is going through concerning the particular widespread of a particular viral outbreak. And while that isn't our specific topic for this week, the specific topic is about a crisis or crises, panic situations, a thing that happens in the gaming world in which it turns everybody's world upside down, and a conflict between adapting to a new situation where the world is no longer the way it used to be. There's this new element, this third element in there between you and how you deal with the world, and then of course how everybody else in the world deals with the same subject. Okay, so let's get on the same page when it comes to dealing with a crisis. All right. First of all, let's define what this crisis is. Now, today and the rest of the week, this is Monster Monday. We'll have Discord Tuesday, World Building Wednesday, and of course, the third pillar of exploration Thursday. And I'm going to say that, strangely enough, it doesn't really matter what the crisis is for our tabletop game. The crisis could be a very natural one, whether it's related to like the environment or the weather, whether it's raging storms, early snows. It could be solar flares or earthquakes, massive fires or torrential rains that that happen. And many times we can use this. These are the basis of some full role-playing games. I believe there was an actual role-playing game designed where in this world it started raining and it never stopped. And although it's not like Waterworld, it's just the world where it's just constantly raining. And if it's not raining, it's about to, and maybe it goes from drizzle to a downpour to rain sliding sideways or something, but it's always raining. And I'm not suggesting that it only be an environmental catastrophe or some kind of panic situation. Maybe it is something like we are dealing with now. Yeah, Jay puts in a blood plague from a raid boss leaving the raid when it wasn't meant to, and infecting everyone, PC and NPC alike. Yeah, in our own world, we are dealing with the spread of a plague, of a pandemic, and how do people act and react to it. People's worlds are changing. Many people are having to reassess their lives because their livelihoods have shut down, and then the ripple effect of one thing happening to everyone else. It's a very simple thing for everyone to say. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's a very simple thing to say, well, hey, everyone, just have a social distancing and everyone stay home, and we'll just wait a month or 3 and then get back to what we would normally do. But the ripple effects of that happening has a dramatic effect on the rest of society. jobs shut down, traffic shuts down. Public transportation shuts down. The ability for people to get food and water. People, because we use a monetary system uh, uh, to engage in our economy, that begins to shut down, and then all of the industries that are um, are based on people, exchanging monies for services and goods, they start to shut down, and then so on and so forth. Uh, uh, the long range. Thank you, Tesla. Yeah. Tesla says, I remember a sci-fi short story where it never stopped raining. It took place on Venus. Didn't know that. There might be a role-playing game based on it. I don't remember the name of the game, and it could be just one of these small publishers, but it could have been based on that. Yeah. And Omen says it might be okay for a work-at-home guy like me, but it'll be different for the people who actually work, um, yeah, 8 to 9 daily in an office. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And when you take that and stretch that out to how it affects so many other industries and individuals and things, that it's a simple thing, much like we do on this channel, where we take a simple word or a phrase or an idea and then extrapolate out what those ramifications would be, is a pretty it's a pretty life-changing thing, even though uh, people may know that it's a temporary condition. Now, Omen says, for instance, as long as my laptop and I can find an internet connection, I can continue to survive, even if Godzilla and King Kong decide to do the tango in the Philippines. Yeah, maybe, just maybe. Hey, if power shut down, I can't imagine this world. If if little by little power starts shutting down because the people who monitor where the power comes from start leaving, that could be pretty, yeah. Yeah. So, but a crisis doesn't necessarily even need to be a pandemic or a disease or a viral outbreak or something. It could be, how common has this happened in fantasy role playing, where the goblinoids start spilling down into the villages and raiding the villages, and the answer's, a very stereotypical answer is, oh, they have to leave their homeland because of some kind of crisis happening away from the humanoid lands, right? Where they're being pushed out by dragons. There are earthquakes. There's famine. The winter season is coming along, or has come early and strong, and they're sweeping down into the lands. And so having that effect. So in our fantasy games, of course, well, not just fantasy, sci-fi, of course, things are turned, the volume's turned up to 11. So whether there is an outbreak of a particular animal or creature, maybe they're lizard-like creatures that just happen to be overspilling into the rest of the world. In our own world, we have had seasons where certain types of animals are breeding heavier than other animals, and we have to watch out for them. For example, maybe due to a low population of birds, we're starting to have swarms of insects, and they're sweeping along. Maybe there is some kind of disease sweeping into plant life or something, such as trees, or maybe there has been a lack of rain for a particular type of crop or something. So the price of, I don't know, oranges or bananas or potatoes or whatever the case may be, maybe the price goes up because a lot of those crops have died out. And so we see that, of course, depending on where you live, it may not affect you very much. You're like, well, I don't really care about orange juice. But, an orange is an orange juice. But in the overall scheme of things, in tabletop games, we're talking about something that will have a ripple effect, especially if it's a crisis that sweeps across the land. I mean, the most common crisis is a zombie apocalypse, right? Where, Ohm says Ireland did get a famine because of potatoes. Yes, and it dramatically affected the people, where they decided that they needed to get on a sailing ship and considering at the time it was a sail across halfway around the world, right? It's either stay here and starve or travel to a distant land where we don't know the language, we don't even know if we're going to even survive to get there, and we're going to arrive in a place that's pretty lawless in general compared to the rest of the world in and of itself. I mean, many people thought they were going to sail off the edge of the world anyway, right? So these kind of crises go back to the zombie apocalypse, right? Oftentimes there are basically two types of encounters with the zombie apocalypse. There of course is the initial survival of humanity against the overwhelming odds of the zombies, right? The overwhelming numbers, and everyone's fighting zombies and things. Okay, the other story that's told is people start to try to adapt in any way they can to the crises, right? The Walking Dead is a perfect example of this, where it's not fighting the zombies anymore. It's, in a way, it's getting in contact and rubbing up against the rest of humanity. The main protagonist walking down the road and they see a place that's been armored up and they've got walls and things, and it's like, okay, we could either stay out here in the wild and have to defend ourselves on a daily basis against zombies, or do we try to find some place safe to go? And then when they knock on the door, of course, there's always can we trust them? They don't want us there. They invite us in with open arms, but they've got these really restrictive rules and so on and so forth. And it's basically a reflection of humanity, or a redefinition of what it means to have interactions with humanity, and what does that mean? And so in a crisis, of course, now I did a huge preamble for this, essentially laying down some ground rules for the rest of the week. But today is Monster Monday, and so what can we pull from Monster Monday? Well, of course, the first basic thing for Monster Monday is, well, monsters. Right? We can come up with some kind of, if we want to use this as the basis for the crisis or a side effect of the crisis, we can have ourselves plenty of monsters. Let's say winter has come strong and early, and there may be even people who have predicted that this winter is going to be the worst and it's going to last 7 months long or something. Yeah, kaiju. Yeah. Yep, the kaiju comes around. There was a Kickstarter that I have called Salt in Wounds, and the whole gaming location is about massive armies that took down a Tarrasque. Now, mind you, of course, it's I understand that in gaming statistics, a Tarrasque isn't as big as a Godzilla-like creature, but just go with it, right? So this major creature runs across the landscape. Everyone's panicked. They get together these massive armies. They're destroying the landscape, and they get these 13 arcane harpoons. The heroes fight the Tarrasque. They take it down. They pin the darn Tarrasque down into the ground, and then a society starts building around it as these 13, what they end up calling Meridian houses, ensure that the Tarrasque never awakens again. And of course, they start hacking at its flesh and using its bones and its skin and its brain matter and its stomach acids and all this other alchemical thing. Well, and so it's like a delayed crisis that has affected the world and the people are living around it. And that's kind of what I'm talking about, where on one hand, some people will adapt to the new situation, even if it will be a temporary adaptation. And then there are others who are fighting to hold on to the way that they used to live. And then there's maybe even a third party where we must adapt, but we can't forget what we used to be or who we used to be in relationship to what's going on outside of us. Yeah, Owen continues to say, if not small creatures that can overwhelm human civilization, give them giant monsters. Right, exactly. And who's to say that these giant kaiju that are stomping, maybe one or more, that are stomping around the world, aren't maybe it's laying eggs, or maybe this thing is causing other things to awaken or panic or run around, much like a major forest fire there. One of our members lives, lives in the Australian and uh, area. I'm sorry, my mind just was thinking about something else. Sorry, back to the point. Major forest fires affect the landscape and the living creatures that live there. They will, wild animals will try to escape the fires. They will then normally, humanity never bumping up against the wildlife will all of a sudden do so as like flocks of birds and land creatures and things like that start sweeping into the human and humanoid lands in your game setting. Same thing, of course, here with modern day and of course science fiction, right? Whether there's some kind of armada sweeping through because they're running from, I don't know, the explosion of it could be like a quasar, pulsar or something, or a star explodes and people are running for their lives because of sweeping radiation and maybe there's a black hole in the center of the galaxy that just, you know, growing exponentially and people are leaving. Yep, Deadman brings up or the California fires. Yep. Tesla says the Reapers in Mass Effect. Yeah, with the California fires, they happen pretty much yearly, every year or every 2 years. There's the sweeping of the California fires and how humanity tries to stop them in people's homes, and there's evacuations and the whole 9 yards. And despite the fact that it's a commonality, heck, here in Central Ohio, we tend to have we are a plain state, a valley state, and the Ohio Valley is a real thing where people live in flood zones. We've had this past week, 2 weeks, we've had a lot of rain, and so much rain that, well, there's, rivers have overflowed, and you can see lots of photographs and video images of floodwaters. And same thing with floodwaters and lack of rain. Now, of course, we're doing tabletop role playing games, so we can take those elements and like add that little extra that makes it a little bit unrealistic in our real world, but cool in our tabletop games, and how it's a great way to throw a monkey wrench into why it is people are acting and reacting the way they are. It's a great way to show, for example, let's pick dragons. We tend not to have too many dragons literally in Dungeons and Dragons. And imagine the world being swept over by large numbers of dragons, and maybe they also even have assuming that the dragons have some relationship with other reptilian creatures and beings and such, maybe they start sweeping over the lands, and people are having a hard time having diplomatic relationships with them. Maybe the cultures are different. Maybe some of these lizard-like creatures are eating them out of house and home. There's a lot of destruction. There are organized militias now to slay them. There are others who are like, we need to adapt to the lizard folk and the dragonborn that are sweeping into our land, and we need to have some kind of diplomatic relation. And then of course, you're going to have the hatred start to pop up on both sides. All kinds of things. There are going to be reasons to have battle with each other because of misunderstandings through lack of knowledge in such an immediate situation, such as, I don't know, a unwary travelers with lack of knowledge destroy the laid eggs of a local lizard folk tribe or something like that. And the lizard folk tribe is pissed off because they destroyed the eggs of their young ones, whereas the I don't know, the explorers or something, or I don't know what that was. I look like these round orbs or something. How was I supposed to know? That kind of thing. Yeah. Omen says, I remember discussing with others that secession of California is a potential disaster in and of itself. Yeah, they talk about that all the time. Yeah, California wanting to politically separate itself into its own country or something. Yep, yep, yep. Yeah, there's always a small group of people, and yes, would have a dramatic effect on the world. It really would, but it, I don't know. Dead man says, or more accurately, many Americans want the southern half of California excised. Yeah, that's a and well, political upheaval is a major game changer as well, right? Where the George R. R. Martin stole this from and reskinned it for his novels, and in that the the political upheaval of say a king dying, a noble person dying, and not putting in writing, or at least not set before everyone in a reasonable manner, who takes over after noble dies is pretty important. And so, of course, that caused this whole turmoil of who's going to take the throne after the last person who sat on the throne is dead. Is it the younger brother of the person that was the king? Is it the the person that sat on the throne? Is it the wife of the king? Is it the sister of the king who's older than the younger brother? And this is a patriarchal society or something. Is it the last person that used to have the kingdom that was who was defeated and exiled, who comes back and is like, well, now that there's weakness, I'm going to take back my kingdom, so on and so forth. So a lot of these things can happen, and I think it's a good catalyst for why I use a mantra. I probably heard it somewhere else. I can't say that I haven't, but I use a mantra where good world design involves if the players don't move in the world should move the player characters. Meaning that sometimes you will find players that want to turtle up quite a bit, and turtling up basically meaning that they create characters for a game, but they decide not to put themselves in danger. And I don't mean dodging away from monsters and trying to find the best way to sneak past something dangerous. I'm talking about literally like players that are saying like, "Oh, I want to open up a tavern," or "I'm not going out into the dangerous world. Why would my character logically go out into a dangerous world?" That's a whole different subject about player characters making characters in a dangerous world and not wanting to involve themselves in it. But also, really good world design means that if they put their feet up on a table in a tavern and decides to eat and drink and stay there, that eventually that situation is going to have to change, right? And that situation could very much mean that the world itself keeps moving, and the player characters, if they decide to sit still, they can't. The business is going to have to close. Guards come into the tavern to figure out what the hell's going on. Why they're just sitting there? There is a war brewing, and why haven't they volunteered their services for the war effort? There's winter storm is coming in, and things are getting shut down. There's a heat wave passing through the town, and it begins. The water sources are drying up. Maybe there's a plague, or there are sweeping waves of insects that are destroying everything they come in contact with. There's a rampaging kaiju that's every step it takes is causing earthquakes and changing the weather around it. It's so huge. The gods have fallen out of the sky and are doing battle in the skies, and they're dying one by one. I mean, all these things we've seen in games, and so therefore those things should affect the player characters even if they aren't part of it. Now, the other part of a crisis is that, and follow me on this. I know it's Monster Monday, but maybe I'm going a little off book here. But along with the crisis is the idea that it's a background element that happens to affect everything else happening in the world. So what I mean is, let's go with the classic zombie apocalypse. Again, initially, it's man against zombie, right? But at some point it's man against man. Zombie just happens to be the background to this world. So an example would be player characters go down road. They see other travelers on road. Player characters need supplies. Other group needs supplies. How do we talk to each other if we're so paranoid, right? And then it's in the context of a world in which we need to figure out how we're going to communicate with each other and have some kind of diplomatic relationship. But we're also both sides are also afraid that if we make the wrong decision or something happens and violence pops off, or we leave without getting the supplies we need, the canned goods and extra ammo and maybe some diesel fuel or whatever the case may be, that the zombies will attack all of us, right? So the mistake on one side affects everyone. Dragon Mech, there it is. I remembered it slightly. Yeah, Dragon Mech is a steampunk fantasy campaign setting for D20 fantasy developed by Goodman Games and Swords and Sorcery Studios. It centers on giant mechs, powerful war machines powered by steam, clockwork, magic, or slave labor. Characters in the setting are engaged in epic conflicts in a world of ancient ruins, mighty mechdoms, and towering city mechs. Yeah, as ridiculous as that sounds, it sounds so cool. I've never played it though. Never played it. But a world in which, heck, we've seen Pacific Rim, right? We've seen Transformers movies and things. How does society deal with giant monsters? Well, they create giant mech creature, mechanized machines to deal with them. Of course, that's a little bit ridiculous. We know that, but it's so cool, right? Who doesn't want to turn an elbow rocket on and punch a big monster in the face with a 20-story giant robot, right? Or pick up a cargo ship and use it as a baseball bat. Those are really cool things to do, and also how society figures out a way to deal with such things. But much like the two Pacific Rim movies, the first Pacific Rim movie was about giant monsters and fighting the kaiju that are coming from the deep ocean in a different dimension. That doesn't really matter where they came from. They're fighting monsters. The second movie dealt with the world that happened to come about because of the crisis in the first place. Corporations vying over the best machines to use to fight against the kaiju. People have adapted to running and hiding in these deep caverns where they're protected as the giant robots and monsters fight in the big major cities. There's an underground. This was actually came about even in the first movie. There's an underground where on the black market, people are harvesting bits and body parts from the giant monsters that are killed, of course, in these major cities, and they're using the body parts and selling the blood and the organs and the flesh and the skin and stuff. All these things I think are really cool. Now, mind you, you don't need to. It's not picking a specific thing that is the crisis to begin with. It is changing the way people act and react within the crisis in the first place. For example, if there's a famine, certain types of food things become very valuable. Stringley says your mic's really bad. I don't think it's the microphone. I think it's my voice. I got a gravelly dead zone in my voice. So yeah. Maybe. Not sure exactly why that's happening over. Stringley says it's the mic. Trust me. I don't know. I'm pretty bad. No. I apologize for that. Maybe I'm a little too close, or I probably need to get my pop filter out. I took the pop filter down because my audio was getting very low. Yeah, there's no way for me to change it though. It could be my stream health is spiking every now and again, so that probably has a lot to do with it for my audio. I'm punching up to the rest of you. Sorry about that. Yeah, you're all right. I okay. I I got the point the first time, but there's nothing I can do about it. I apologize, but technology and that kind of thing. And these are the kind of things you can't fix live by saying that it's doing it over and over again. Heck, I've had streams where my face has been frozen for 15 minutes, and it's like can't do anything about it. Sorry. Now, one other thing about one of the great things about dealing with is not one other thing, is many things. One of the great things that dealing with, um, you're fine. It's just unfortunately those kind of things are unable to be changed during midstream at all. Yeah, and Jay's like not experiencing any hassles here. Well, TriCasting happens to have those problems. Now, the other thing, the thing about a crisis is that when people start to change and their lifestyle starts to change, um, it's also possible. It's also possible that what things are valuable or not, what people hold true to or not, the way people deal with each other, is a great catalyst for creating conflict in the world. An example would be um, the world overrun by monsters that are so vicious that they are eating humanity, and maybe they are devouring people as we speak, but they're intelligent. Maybe those lizard folk or something, or anything, doesn't really matter. Demons, that's another commonality. A portal opens and demons spill forth into the world, right? And maybe it's a reasonable idea for humanity to go, you know what, let's make a deal with them. How about we hand over to you a dozen human beings a month, and will that satisfy you to not kill the rest of us? And the monstrous creatures are like, yeah, that's good. Yeah, instead of us ravaging your people and your people trying to fight us and all this kind of stuff, just hand over about a dozen people, and you can go about your business. And then, of course, the community has to figure out how do they pick 12 adult age, or maybe not even adult age individuals to hand over. um and it's like, um there's going to be somebody that's going to raise their hand and go like, what the hell are we doing? Yeah, yep. Not just a lottery. There is a, what's the short story, The Lottery. Everyone gets back together to pick a note or a stone or whatever they picked out of a basket, to stone that individual to death because that was the thing that you did, because that's the thing, right? Oh yeah, I tried the Minotaur. Yeah, Tesla says the Minotaur, 7 youths and maidens sacrificed each year, and for those people, that's a reasonable situation. Hey, we solved the problem. Now, from the outside, you get there and you're like, what the hell are you guys doing? Like, this is wrong. And you've got the other people who are going, well, I guess I'll volunteer because the thing needs to be done because of the crisis of the thing. You know, it's a great way to. While I don't suggest this being done in many, if any, gaming group, if you have a gaming group that's mature enough to openly have their ethics and moral standards confronted in game, and being able to separate their true desires or beliefs away from the gaming world itself, and dealing with what exists in the world, it's a great way to have those challenges without anyone technically being right or wrong, but having a conflict both externally and internally when it comes to um, their moral values. Yeah. Omen says, "What if, plot twist? The Minotaur is really just lonely, and it's usually the guards who kill those youths and maidens. Like they just use the Minotaur as an excuse. You know, how many times have we seen people take a crisis and use it as an excuse for something else? I'm looking at you, toilet paper hoarders, right? I'm going to buy up all the toilet paper, and instead of 8 US, we're going to charge $80 for it. Let's see what happens there, right? And then, of course, that forces companies like Amazon and eBay to try to crack down on the people who were trying to price gouge everyone by overinflating the prices, only to have it backfire when the toilet paper companies and paper products companies are like shrugging their shoulders, like you you do realize like we're still producing and making paper products, like it's not this is an artificial shortage that you guys created on your own. Um, that's just a simple thing we've dealt with now, but I mean that's a real thing. Maybe getting across a major river was a couple of copper pieces, and you get on a boat and you go across the river. But if there's a flood or fires or rampaging monsters or any kind of crisis, hey, those boat tenders that take you across the river are like, yeah, you're gonna have to give up a whole bunch more than copper. I'm looking at like 50 gold minimum, and everyone's like 50 gold. I can't get 50 gold, and like you ain't getting on the boat now, you know. And then people start sabotaging the boats, and then people start murdering each other to get on the boat, and you know, and starting extrapolating it. Right when a crisis hits, you always get you both get equal measure of the best of humanity and the worst of humanity. And I think those are great. That's great fodder for your NPCs, your monsters. We are here on Monster Monday, and we talk about like NPCs, you know, the NPCs and player characters' backgrounds, the people that they meet, and the monsters and the motivations thereof, and that conflict between the two. So yeah, yeah. Tesla says, you want a plot twist, check out the Minotaur quest in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I don't know that one. Hmm. Hmm. I'd like to check that out, though. I love Assassin's Creed. I love the aesthetic of the Assassin's Creed games, man. They're just awesome. Omens has, here's an idea. The boatman charges extra because mermen attack people on the river, but the reality is that the mermen are actually friendly. Yep. Yep. Lies, lies, lies. Yeah. I mean, how often does that happen? How the hell? I mean, not only does that happen often when people take advantage, but oftentimes finding the truth behind things in during a crisis is not possible. We've seen plenty of movies where someone wants to rob a bank during a major storm or an earthquake or something. There are murders and kidnappings that happen during a time of war or conflict or what have you. You know, and of course, how easy is it for people to discover those kind of things? A lot of times people don't. They don't. Maybe those criminals get away with it or something. Or they get arrogant and realize they can get away with so many things only to have it bite them in the ass, right? The boatman that's taking people to safety across a major river who then decides to take his weapons and his men and dump those people into the river because it's more financially successful to only go halfway across the river, dump everybody in the river, let them die, and then make the trip back to the shore to take another group of people rather than going all the way across, having everyone disembark, and then coming back to pick up more passengers, right? Yep. Tesla's like, if Theseus killed the Minotaur, how's the Minotaur still around? Well, it depends on where you're coming from. Is Theseus in league with the Minotaur, or is this something that happens in cycles or something? Whatnot? Yeah, just picking mythology there, right? But there could also be like in this world, maybe there is something that happens. You know, the kaiju, the Tarrasque or something that starts to stomp its way around the landscape. Maybe it happens every century or so. How many times have we seen the proverbial, you know, every fill in the blank large number of years later, a thing happens, and the PCs happen to be around when the thing happens. George R. R. Martin even stole that. The coming of the Red Comet, right? If the Red Comet comes by and all of a sudden magic starts to increase in the world, kind of, sort of, you know. Um, we've seen this in fantasy novels and gaming where magic either increases or begins to decrease in the world, and that starts to change people's outlook on the world and how they react. So let's go through some NPCs, and let's just blast off a ton of NPC ideas in this world. So, all right, let's come up with, well, we're a dark light here on this channel, so let's not avoid the elephant in the room. Let's come with some of our darkest ideas for NPCs. Okay, so you're going to have people who are going to try to take advantage of the crisis, even if they have no ability to actively stop or prevent the crisis. So you're definitely going to have people price gouging other people, whether they are hoarding supplies. They're hoarding something very necessary. It could be the people hoarding the boats because people need boats to travel. They could be hoarding mounts that people need to ride on to go across vast mountain ranges or something. They could be hoarding food and weapons, clothing, anything that people need. Maybe they could be hoarding a particular, let's go with, I'm thinking of District 9, the movie, where the criminals are hoarding cat food because the prawns, which is a racially derogatory term to call the alien creatures, but right, the prawns are standing in line, handing over alien weapons so they can get their hands on some cat food. And what do the criminals do? Oh, they want cat food, we want power? Boom, there you go, right? Hey there, okay. Thank you, Dead Man. 34 minutes for the Minotaur quest in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Well, thank you. Popped into the Discord. Just as a reminder, again, this show, just as it is printed in the lower thirds of the video, this show is TriCast over Twitch, YouTube, and Discord. The audio is actually in Discord. So if you'd like to join us in either of those or participate in either of those platforms, you may do so, or pick 2 or 3 of them if you wish. And if you join the Discord server for this channel, everything's happening down in the boiler room. So please join in over there. So not only join Discord, but just pop down into the boiler room. You can join in the chat, and then you can, of course, join into the voice room. But just as a reminder, just make sure you're muted out while the show is live. But of course, you could participate over there anytime you wish. Now, along with the obligatory people who want to take advantage, of course, they're going to also be, and usually that is taking advantage for economic reasons. But there also will be people who want to grab for power. Yeah, that means it's not everything, but just about everything. Yeah, it's economic, right? Everyone wants to get over on the other people. There are also going to be people who are trying to elevate themselves above the norm. Maybe there's something with society that has prevented them from leading their chosen lot, their status in life, and so people will use a crisis to raise themselves, to garner much more status. Now, this rubs up against the economic part of it, but it is kind of the same thing. For example, the person who says, hey, I am your leader because I have a safe place for you to be, and oh, by the way, while you're hiding out in my safe place, do as I tell you to do. Right? There are people who are far willing to say murder, kill those in power so that they can take over. Oh, darn, the nobles are dead. I guess since I'm a rich merchant, I guess I'm going to have to take place. I mean, you guys listened to me before, and since we don't have those, since the power of if blood isn't a thing anymore, maybe we'll start to, think about merit, maybe, or the people who are the richest or the smartest or who have the best weapons are going to start taking over. So that's um, another vector of NPCs dealing with other people in a crisis, where you know. Yep, Jay says NPC idea, the morally corrupt evangelical. Yep, cult-like and entirely out for themselves. Can we say real life? How many cult leaders in real life are talking about the end of the world? Half cult, half prepper. Join me. It's the end of the world. You want to live? You want to survive the spiritual apocalypse? Come with me. All you have to do is give of yourself. And of course, they wrap it. They wrap it in a semi palatable meal of sorts, not physical meal, but you get what I'm saying, right? If someone says a thing and they are skilled at being deceptive, they know how to talk out the side of their neck, and yep. Tesla says there was one in the mist. Yep. We see this all the time. The corrupt evangelical that starts to twist and turn something that normally was held as a beacon of light and hope and twist it for their own goods. And we see that in our world today, and we absolutely see that during a crisis. Right? And a lot of those evangelical can be used in an extremely broad method, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be, although it's often used in media, some kind of like pseudo Taoist Christian mixing of manipulation of something that is people hold true, but then that person twists it just enough so that it's believable. And you go, this person makes sense, and you realize, like, no, not at all. Yep. Thank you, Jay. Yep, Koresh, Applewhite, Jones. The list goes on. Yes, we've had around the world there have been ones, but here in the States we've had the Branch Davidians. Who was it? Yeah, David Koresh in the Branch Davidians. There was of course, the shootout at Waco. There was the Poison Kool-Aid group. I can't remember who they were. Suicide cults will prop up in a crisis, especially if that crisis goes on and on, or the crisis is the evidence that proves the reasoning for the cult to exist in the first place. So, for example, fantasy world, the gods are dying because they're doing battle with each other. I couldn't imagine what a fantasy world would be like when the Olympian gods start to destroy the Titans, and what happens to humanity down on the ground when the gods do battle. Do they actually see the battle? Do they feel? Does their faith start to become destroyed because of their connections to the mystical realm? I don't know, but that happens to be the backdrop of a lot of small and large press role-playing games where humanity no longer can hear or see the gods, and what happens to people. I'm sure there would be plenty of suicide cults that spring up after an event like that. Heaven. Thank you, there, Jay. Heaven's Gate in the People's Temple. Thank you very much. Yep. Yes. I mean, there are so many. Of course, there's the con man, right? I mean, some of these cults are made by either people who truly believe it, and they just happen to be. I don't want to say crazy because that's a disrespect to the people who have mental illnesses, but there are people who believe a thing, overwhelming evidence, so now they truly believe the thing, and then there's also people who are going, great, I had this con thing going for a little while, but this is a great way to start conning people. Can we say, in our modern world, how many people are trying to come up with get-rich-quick schemes to con people that do this thing and you will be cured and or immune to the virus that is sweeping our world today, right? Everything from supplements to, I don't know, copper fit or something. I don't know. Any number of things. I'm sure in every country, multiple times over a day, there's someone out there who's like, hey, you know what? I was cured, or I'm immune because I do this thing, or I drink or eat or pray over this thing, and it won't affect you either. Now, we also have the people who are the not just the preppers, but they are the told you so's, right? The I told you so's. Okay, so many times you might see them in business, you'll see them in politics, you especially see them in military, where they say, I told you this thing was going to happen. From now on, I got the guns, I've got the armor, I've got the swords and spears, I've got the mounts. You do as I say because you need someone who is not only in charge of the leadership, but also in charge of defending us not just from this crisis, but every crisis heading forward, right? I mean, in any post-apocalyptic world, you while it makes sense to gather together the people with the best brains, usually the bigger guns are the ones that start dominating in our post-apocalyptic books and television and movies, right? And sure, it makes a lot of sense to say, in my opinion, or start raiding libraries and finding a way to, oh, I don't know, how to purify water, how to hunt and kill game, how to, getting a bunch of books for medicine and figuring out that kind of stuff, getting finding as many copies of the of survivalist guides of any sort and anarchist cookbooks and all this other kind of stuff and getting those things together. Usually it devolves down to who's got the biggest gun, and then talking sense in the people who've got the most and biggest guns to say, hey, listen, you might want to buy like a farmer's almanac and learn, I don't know, how to plant food or gather, say, gather people together who have the brightest minds. Going back to aqueducts might be a really good thing if we live in a safe place that's far away from a place with pure water. And it's those kind of conflicts where money starts to disappear, but the value of, say, a doctor or a pediatrician or a veterinarian becomes extremely important during a crisis. Maybe there is a crisis over medications become very valuable. And in a lot of post-apocalyptic, while this doesn't necessarily need to be post-apocalyptic, oftentimes in post-apocalyptic worlds, cash is useless, but barter, the value of certain things, clean water, food, canned goods, all that kind of stuff becomes extremely important. Even to the point where the value of humanity itself, right? The sacrifice, the sacrifice of seven maidens and 7 youths to the Minotaur becomes very important. How do you get those sacrificial individuals? Do you restructure your culture so that you have volunteers? Do you have press gangs to go after those sacrificial individuals? Are those sacrificial individuals, have you reshaped your culture where the people are being bred for sacrifice in the first place? And this becomes a new function of status in your world. One of my children is going to be born and raised to be one of the sacrificed, right? That kind of thing. Maybe the group is like, we're not sacrificing any of our people, but we sure will go out there and beat people about the head and shoulders and bring them back to sacrifice them. What then, right? Also, what people will do to hold on to their power or to garner more power, right? The classic sacrificing human beings to summon a demon from the netherworld is a commonality, and the reason why it's so common and such a trope in everything from horror to fantasy gaming, even to the modern day and beyond. The reason why it's common is because we can see people doing it. People murder other people for less than the power of a wish, right? And if somehow, some way, you could achieve wish fulfillment by murder killing other people, people would do it, especially if they, well, even if there isn't any evidence that a thing could be possible. If there's a 1% chance, some people will take that 1% chance. And so maybe in this world, that portal to the nether world for demons and blah, 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 you're going to have people who are going to say, yeah, I'm not going to die by being, run down by an onslaught of demons or put into press gangs by devils or something. I'm going to rub up against them. They're going to be my best friend. Harry, what's going over there? Harry pops in with a thumb over at YouTube. I appreciate that, Harry. I really appreciate that as well. Oh, by the way, if you like long form content and you're not too busy, like, share, subscribe, follow over on Twitch. Any of those things are very helpful for the channel. If for no other reason than to affect the analytics, so that this channel is more is more visible in the onslaught of the storm of social media and the way it operates, right? So, along with having our NPCs and their freaking attitudes and, murder killing people and things like that, you're going to have a small percentage of people who are the best of themselves. And in a very strange way, especially in a lot of the post-apocalyptic settings and in our movies and our television show and books, the best of us sometimes can be the worst of us. An example would be the idea of, do you run from a conflict to live and fight another day, or do you stay and hold your ground because you don't want to sacrifice your humanity? And oftentimes in a crisis, sometimes you may have to do a little bit of the moral and ethical sacrification, if that's a word. I made it up if it isn't. The sacrification of self and others becomes a big deal, I remember, and this has been done plenty of times, but an example would be in the televised most recent version of Battlestar Galactica. Many, not all of them, but many of the ships, the armadas that were leaving the war in the very beginning of that show, could warp to a distant location, and not all of them could. And the decision was, do we keep our military vessels and try to save the lives of as many people as possible, knowing that this is a fruitless situation, and that we will all die by the millions? Or do we take only, I don't know, what was it, 50,000 or 100,000 or whatever, and warp to safety, knowing that we're going to leave behind much of humanity? And who makes that decision? And then how do you live with this decision after it's been made? And what do you do with the person who's more than happy to sacrifice people to live another day because of the argument that, hey, somebody's got to make the decision, and if it's going to be me against them, it's going to be me first, right? And so what a crisis does is it really starts to, some people would say that our true self springs forward. People who would, sometimes the people at the lowest rankings of society become the best of us, and many times the people at the top of society, the people that we trust, become the worst, right? It's the everybody go left. That's safety when the people in power are like, I'm going right, because really, that's the real safe place, Omen says, a difficult and painful decision. It's one of the things that bothers me right now. Yeah, exactly. In our own world now, it is the idea of closing borders and It unfortunately in medical triage, when hospitals and medical care gets so bad that it gets to the point where medical personnel have to decide who do we help and who do we not help. As a matter of fact, it's quite important for people who are paramedics and people who are like protect others in dangerous situations. Right? Jay says you'd have people buying their way onto the ark. That's for sure. Yeah, yeah. The How many times have we seen that? And of course you're saying the ark could be anything. It could be a starship. It could be a boat. It could be the safe underground shelter that can only support, fill in the blank of a number, 100, 1,000, 10,000 people, but only so many people either know of his existence, and the people that do know of his existence only get so many tickets. And then of course you've got the hero who's like, no, 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 you go ahead, I'm going to stay back and go after the little puppy, or no, I'm going to leave space open for someone who really needs it. And yep. James like, exactly, a good trope for that reason. Yep. And then you have the bastard who's like, ticket, I'll take the ticket, I don't care, hey, I'm leaving, pushing past all the women and children to get to the front of the line. Yeah. We've seen that over and over again. Can we say Titanic? Can we say what was the slew of movies in the 90s where we were going to get hit by meteors or little planetoids or something? All through those kind of stories are told. Yep. Dr. Smith, yep. Dr. Smith from the Lost in Space series. Yeah, the most recent one. Yeah, I'm going to lie and steal someone's identity to save my ass, right? Yep, Jay brings up 2012. Yep. There was a literal arc that they were working on, and the main protagonists have to travel around the world. Of course, we get a little bit of a view of what's happening with the world destroying itself or something. I think it was like neutrinos or something. I don't know what the reason was, but whatever the case might be, in the 2012 they had to get to the ark, and who was allowed inside of it and who wasn't, and of course you had the people who wanted to buy their way onto it, and how do you pick and choose the people that go on the ark, and how do you stop the people who want to go on it but can't, and who makes that decision? And yeah, great tropes to pick and choose from when making NPCs. And of course, guess what we have in the background? We've got our crisis. And so that's what we're going to talk about the rest of the week. Yeah, we in the background we have to have our crises, and our crises is the thing that is going to push and pull. As a matter of fact, even the idea of the crisis coming forward and impacting people while they're trying to make those decisions in the first place. So, the people in the wagon or in the plane or traveling across the landscape that are attacked, waylaid by the crisis that's happening in and around them, of course, is the thing that they have to watch out for, because, hilarity ensues when you get that bastard that wants to care for themselves and doesn't care about anyone else, whatnot. So anyway, guys, thank you very much. Today was a good day. Listen, rest of the week we will be talking about the other crises that are going on, and what that crisis is, again, is unimportant. It's the idea of inserting it into your tabletop role-playing game in your setting. And mind you, let's say you're getting a little bit bored with your setting. Why not add one in there? We can always have a good crisis. What is it? Never let a good crisis go to waste. We're going to talk about that the rest of the week as well. So, guys, thank you very much for participating in this. I really appreciate it. Guys, have a great day. I'll see you later. Bye.